Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the art of automated system design. It's a subject really that's often associated with just marketing, but it really spreads a lot wider throughout the business model, and really should be adopted where it can either add value, increase the speed or productivity or convenience for your clients or your team. So we're all precious about time. Let's be realistic about it. Who's got more than they can deal with? Nobody. It's a commodity. It's a precious resource that, we can always replace money. We can replace jobs or material things, but time is that thing that people often overlook. And with so many demands on that limited resource, I see it all too often where people are working extremely hard to save a penny here and they're focused on that top line number, but they're so blind to the thousands of pounds of dollars that is sort of leaking out of the business in other areas, either due to lack of efficiency. And, there's a great statement here in the UK, and, I'm not quite sure if that's over in the States. Scott will cover that for us in a moment, but, it's penny wise and pound foolish, or penny wise and dollar foolish, which is the point I'm trying to get across. So, if you're an FD listening to this, you'll be tuned and dialed into that, of course. But, for people at the front of the coalface, like the sales teams who are just at full pace, sometimes you can get focused on the small things and miss the bigger things. And, that's really what we're talking about, where businesses become really poorly, not managed, but, that efficiency could just be so much better. So the investment into automating systems, professionally, and then making a business commitment of time and money to implement them correctly, will pay dividends time and time again. And, I really want you to start looking past that initial investment cost when we get to that. But, the starting point is really recognizing that automation is developing and it's fast, especially with bots, chat bots, live chat, or, artificial intelligence, so businesses need to embrace this and look beyond that initial investment, like I said before, and really concentrate on that longer term focus and the returns that brings. So in today's episode of the Open Mic Podcast, we're going to cover the process around automated system design, plus a lot more. And I'm absolutely privileged to be joined today by what I've got to say is one of the widely respected experts in the field. And I'm very grateful, and a warm welcome to Scott Richins, who's up really early in Arizona today in Phoenix. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule today, Scott. It's great to have you on the Open Mic Podcast.
Hey, Mike, I'm excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation to join and to be able to share some of my experience with your audience.
No, that's absolutely, it's absolutely awesome to have you here. And I've known Scott probably about 3 or 4 years now, since I went over to Arizona at Infusionsoft for the first time. But a little bit about Scott, when I meet a lot of people in the digital space, and there's a lot of people who are just there and now, and they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. But Scott's one of those people who's consistently just produce at the exceptionally highest level. And, when you look at your own teams, you're always, whether that's your sales team, it's your customer service team, and you can always say, what person can I count on to hit my quota, or what person can I count on to deliver that? And Scott is certainly one of those people who's just Mr. Consistent and Mr. Reliable. And outside of that, he's pretty awesome at what he does as well. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on Scott. He's been what we call a system architect for the last 10 years. Spent 6 years at Infusionsoft, where he coached thousands of business owners on how to design and build those automation systems. He's had the privilege of coaching industry-leading companies on the internet, financial, marketing, education, health, wellness, and even neuroscience. So a broad range of niches to have a look at. And after 15 months at a high-end agency, he started Scott Richins Consultancy to focus on helping entrepreneurs, architecturally build the business systems. He believes in entrepreneurs can leverage automation systems to accelerate their impact and grow their bottom line whilst creating a business that serves them and their families. So Scott, hopefully that did you justice as a background of what I know about working with you and a little bit about your journey. But it's always great. I love for you to share your own journey with the listeners and the watchers of the podcast on the blog. Tell us a little bit more about your journey over the landscape for the last 10 years or so.
Sure. It's funny. I think it's a little bit of an odd journey. I think most people's journey ends up being pretty odd and unique to them. And mine was unique in its own way, growing up in the generation of people who, when we were young, computers and the internet was really just becoming a thing. And so I always feel like I'm a late bloomer, but it wasn't around when I was young. And as I got into my teens and such, computers started coming around. And I remember watching people that were early adopters, and they were crushing with computers. Like, my mind was blown with somebody making a PowerPoint presentation, let alone 3D CAD design. I was reflecting on some experiences that I had in high school and secondary school, and was just remembering, like, I used to feel like computers were just these magical boxes and machines. I was like, I don't even know what to do. I should go take a typing class. Like, and you know, that's where I started on things. But when I was young, what I really loved was math and science. Yeah. I loved the problem solving. I loved the concept of not the subjectivity of things like English and writing and language. I hated that. I loved the concept of having a toolbox of things that I could apply in multiple situations. So you'd learn a math concept, or you'd learn a science concept, and that was a true principle that could be applied in different areas in different situations.
And that's relative in business, Scott, isn't it? It's exactly the same. We hit these problems all the time.
Absolutely. And so that passion that I had when I was young led me into engineering, to pursue a degree in engineering. And as I did that, I got further and further into it. And I had some experiences during my college days where I got to work with a small business throughout college, as well as interface with a lot of people that were doing graphic design and industrial design and studying business. And I got to a point where I went, I think I'm in the wrong place. Like, I love problem solving, but I don't love how I'm applying that in engineering. And as I was graduating college, the company that I've been working for throughout college said, hey, we want you to come run our company. And so at the age of 23, I was privileged with the opportunity to start running a multi-million-dollar manufacturing company. Wow. And it was just an incredible experience while I was there. I feel, looking back on it, it was kind of like a little petri dish for me and my entrepreneurial career, because I started at like minimum wage, working out in the warehouse. But I got to take the way that I look at the world and started improving systems throughout there. It was like, well, hey, we could do this more efficiently here, or why don't we actually document processes and procedures so we can improve our consistency of the
like a process mapping sort of.
Yeah, exactly. And it was doing that, and then it shifted to helping manage servers and leading website design projects. And then I started getting into accounting and getting into sales and marketing, and that's when I discovered Infusionsoft. And like, I remember just taking system after system after system after system in the business and going, how can we be more effective with this? Like, is there a better way? And that's really become my approach to life and what I do with my clients is there a better way? And the funnest part about that for me has been is there's generally always a better way. And it just becomes this way of looking at the world to say, great, I understand, here's what we have, but what could we do with it? Yeah. And starting to just go through that thought exercise. And throughout all of that, it led me to this point where I just realized I had this passion for helping design business systems. And ultimately, as you mentioned, I joined Infusionsoft and was a coach there and helped people on board. And really, I started going deep in marketing automation systems and sales systems and fulfillment systems and starting to create all of those. And that's where I've really found my passion. And so things have developed quite a bit in the last 8 years. The tool set and the things that are at our disposal as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as systems designers are just so far beyond where we were, 8-10 years ago, where everything was custom code if you needed to integrate, and the systems were pretty rudimentary. These days, there's too many to choose from.
Yeah, I think I saw an infographic, Scott. I think I'm not sure if it's 2006, 7, where there was like 300 or 400 players in the MarTech sort of space, and maybe even less than that. And now there's like 5,000 or something ridiculous.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's probably even more than that. You'll probably correct me on that one, but the scale is 100-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold. It's just gone berserk, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And so just the opportunity that we have to start creating systems and such that will help us automate our businesses, help us buy back the time, like you were talking about in the beginning, which is the most important thing. how do not just we as the entrepreneurs, but also how do we share that with our teams so that our teams can be doing more fulfilling work, so that they can be leveling up really in the value stack and starting to provide that better customer service to your clients, which you can't automate that. Great, let's automate the rest of the stuff so you can put all of that right back at serving your clients in a higher fashion, delivering a better experience for them. That's really the power of creating these systems, starting to put them in place.
Yeah, I get that all the time. And I think one of the things that I always look back to when I first started in business, so you got to date this, Scott. This is 1994. So just for the listeners, the younger generation out there, no internet, well, not publicly available. It may have been invented. So I don't want all the comments coming in saying, hey, Mike, the internet was invented in 1991 or whatever it was. I'm just saying is in commercial businesses, we needed to find something. We had a book or we was, researching it. We had no internet, no Google, all the social media channels weren't done. We were just about moved on to email, although it was a very, very basic concept of what email were. No emojis or graphics or video embeds or anything like that. So you got to date this, but we used to work all day doing our sort of entrepreneurial sort of grind or hustle, if you want to call it that. And then at the night, we'd log on to a DOS-based Sage financial system. So I'm not quite sure for the Americans if you have Sage financial account over there. It's like zero QuickBooks into it. But it's Sage in the UK is pretty, the UK audience will understand that. And it used to be this DOS-based green screen with red boxes on it. And it was red and green. It looked like Christmas. It was, like, oh. But you'd do that in the evening, 6 while 10. And that's what Scott's talking about, getting your time back. And, just in the last 5 years, it's changed massively. But the last 20 years, we've gone really from archaic to, space age, really, from what we used to do, and the primary communication for us were faxing. We used to use faxes, because email, is this really right? Is it right? So we used to use faxing all the time. We used to be in finance. So we used to fax proposals for credit underwriting and, all that sort of stuff. And here's a quick story. And it's slightly off topic, but it's totally off topic, but I want to share it just for the human factor. So on the old faxes, you used to remember there used to be thermal paper. So as a finance company, we were regulated by obviously the governments and things like that. And we had to keep records for 7 years. So we used to fax all these proposals and things like that. We used to put them in the manual folders in the filing cabinet in the office, and it was locked and secure. And of course, we got an audit about 5 or 6 years later, and they said, we want to pull this file out. So we pulled this file out, and we went, so have you got the customer's proposal? So we pulled this thermo fax paper out, and of course, it had just faded off. So there was absolutely nothing, no digital system of it. And the thermo paper on the fax had lost all the ink, and there was the odd patch, and you could half see the surname and none of this. So the audit were totally blown. But nobody ever thought about that, and things like that. So the technology, and I suppose what I'm getting back to for the listeners is, I'll tell you what I'd love you to do is use the hashtag #TheOpenMic and send us a message. Share one of the old-fashioned texts that you used to live your business on. We used to live on faxes, and I'd love to hear that from you. As you say, I'll put a comment on the blog below, and if you're watching this on the podcast channel, you can see that on blog.thesuccessive.io/podcast. But I'd love to hear your Fred Flintstone or your archaic technology. Mine is the fax. As a finance company, we had an audit, and we pulled all the audit files out and all the thermal paper. It was more or less evaporated and lost all the data. So with no audit, we could have had anything on there. So, but you're right, Scott. It's that time that we'll get back in technology, and this is what we're going to be discussing more about today, isn't it? Okay, so just to sort of roll into that, that's what we're going to be discussing in more detail about that, how we can buy that time. But it's the architecture of the systems that's really we're going to dig deep in. And getting started, Scott, the role of automation in business. Just tell me a little bit more about that and how you approach it and what are the fundamentals.
The role of automation business, really, my first experience with that goes back to that manufacturing company that I was talking about. And I remember we manufactured custom drapery hardware. If you want to hang your curtains on some fancy rods, like we were the place that you'd come to buy that kind of stuff. And it was fascinating as I watched. We had the office up front who was the ones that would interface with the clients. And the clients would call and say, hey, wait, I need to change the finish on my order, or hey, I need to get this thing rushed. I'll pay you extra. I just need it expedited, or whatever it might be. And then those who are working in the front office would come back to the warehouse and they would say, "Where's the order?" And the orders would go throughout the warehouse. We had these bins where we would take a fat paper clip and we would take the packing list and the pick list and we would just clip it to the bin. And so suddenly it would just, like, everybody would drop everything. You'd shout out what the invoice number was or the order number was, and everybody would run and start rifling through the hundreds of active orders that we had throughout the 20,000 square foot warehouse at the time. And it was just asinine. And so we started looking at it as a company. We're like, is there a better way? Like, is there a better way that we could handle this? And, looking back on it, what we built was ridiculous. But I've spoken to the owners, and up until about a year ago, they've still used this system that we had developed about 10 years ago. Yeah. And it was just this simple system. We contracted with a developer to come in and build a system where we attach barcodes to each one, barcode scanners to each one of the computers that we set throughout the station. We printed a barcode on the order, and we would just scan the order, and we'd scan the location, we'd scan the employee, and it gave us this ability to then quickly just go in and type in the order number, and from the office, without having to come outside, they'd pull out a little intranet website, and they'd punch in the order number. They could see all the scans in and out from every place, and they go, "Oh, it's in paint, it's in shipping, it's, the order hasn't been started yet." Yeah. And they just go out and they'd know exactly where to go. We'd pull the order and off we'd go. And the impact that simple, archaic, little platform had for the company was just, it was like incalculable. We couldn't describe how much time and just wasted time that saved for the company, and made me go, wait a minute, this is pretty interesting. Like that one thing that we built saved us so much time. Yeah. What else can we do?
Yeah. Because that's what it fuels, doesn't it? It sparks it, doesn't it? Because that curiosity comes in. And that's what I see in our businesses, that you do something, you think, whoa, and it's that penny drop moment where you think, oh, what's next? What's that? And then you get that desire for it, don't you?
Absolutely. It's exactly that, to where it's so many times the way that we operate in business is just based on those habits that we've always had. It's like, well, why do you do it this way? Well, because that's how it's always been done. Yeah. But when you can take the time and you can stop and you can just step back from it for a moment, and you can say, okay, what if we were to design this brand new, if we were to start fresh, what would we do? How would we do it differently? And where are the areas that, if I could have my team and my employees spend the most time, where would it be of most value for not just us and for them, but also for our clients? Yeah, right. And when you can look at that, and then if you don't have the skills or the experience yourself, engage with somebody who does, to assess your business and start to say, hey, where are the areas where we can start to buy back that time?
Absolutely.
Where are the areas that we can start to automate things? Like, the possibilities that begins to open are just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were chatting off air before we went on live. We talked about never start with the software, start with the processes and things like that. And yep. So I think that leads nicely into that sort of second point, which is, if I'm a listener, listening to this podcast, watching it on the blog, there's some obvious things like, I need to, there's legislation, like in the UK, we're making tax digital. So all our tax returns and accounting policies has to now be online, linked to the government and things like that, a bit like your IRS over there and things like that. So there's things that we're forced to do. But I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there who take out this stuff that you have to do. How do they know when they're ready to automate, Scott? What are the sort of red flags or the key signals that they should be looking for?
That's an awesome question. So I've got two stories for you on that one. Yeah. One, I had a client who came on board with me while I was at Infusionsoft. I help a lot of people with their onboarding, and so it was first helping them implement. Like many of these people, it was the first time they'd started to look at automating their sales and marketing systems. And one of the clients that I remember specifically came on board, and he had been certified with a fairly well-known coaching organization. And he had quit his corporate job where he used to do a lot of internal coaching, and now he was going to go off on his own and start coaching people through his own company. And he came to me, he said, okay, great, I bought Infusionsoft, let's automate my business. I said, awesome. What is your business? Like, what are your business processes? And he was like, what do you mean? And I went, what do you mean? What do I mean? and the story, like that point is to illustrate, like, if you are just getting started in your business and you have never sold anything, you don't have any processes in place, you're not at the point where you're ready to automate.
No.
Okay. We always had a saying at Infusionsoft that said, you can't automate sales and marketing without sales and marketing. If the process doesn't exist, then you're taking a large gamble of investing in automating an unproven process.
Yeah.
You know, a true story here, you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, Mike, in the prep. I just went off on my own about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I build automation systems for a living.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I've built hundreds of automation systems for various businesses. I have not yet automated my sales process, because I'm still working out the fine details in what mine is. And I'm managing it manually at this point, so that I can prove what that process is. And then I don't waste a lot of time like building something and finding it doesn't work. Like, no, hey, it takes me a little bit more time right now, but I'm spending that additional time creating a tailored, personalized process for each of my prospects and my clients. And throughout that process, I'm learning. And those learnings will then be translated into the automated system, the automated sales process that I'm describing here. So that's what I would, that's the first thing that I would suggest is, hey, don't look at a brand new process necessarily and say, hey, how do I automate this? Like, how would I automate this from the get-go? There are few times when that's the best way to do it, especially if it's a hands-on process where you're going to communicate with clients or prospects or whatever it might be. Hey, just do it manually for a while.
Absolutely.
I believe I heard Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Work Week, whenever he would launch a new product or a new business, he would, for the first couple of weeks, take all of the Q&A that came in himself and manually write individual responses to everybody. And through that process, he would get about 95% of the questions that he was going to get. And each one of his responses, he would take a long time crafting, and he would pull that response and he would put it in like an FAQs or training manual for people that would then come on and manage that process in the future.
Yeah,
the same type of process that you want to go through. If you haven't proven the model, then you probably don't want to spend time automating the model yet, or the process.
One of the things that we have a saying in here, and if it's not right offline, it can't be right online, type of thing. And that's just following on what you're saying there. That you've got to get it right offline, on the whiteboard, on the flip chart. Even if you use a piece of software or something like Lucid Charts or Funnel Flows or something like that, map it out and draw it out and test and measure it. And I suppose it's not a crime to do everything straight away. You don't have to automate everything straight away, Scotty. Just maybe focus on the ones that's going to have the biggest impact early on while you develop the other processes. Maybe a bit of good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, I said I don't have my sales process fully automated at this point, but I have my appointments automated. Yeah. So if somebody books an appointment with me, like we avoid the back and forth of well, what time works for you? Crap, I just booked an appointment then. What else? Just avoid that. That's one that makes sense. That's a very point solution that I can help automate that stuff. And then, I'll just walk through and I'll start implementing more of those processes as we go. But, one other thing, as far as how do you know when you're ready to start automating in your business? One other thing that you want to make sure that you consider is there will be some sort of investment that you will make into setting up your automation systems. And that'll be time, that'll be money, that'll be energy. Like you're going to have to sacrifice one or multiples of those limited resources that you have. And so the key thing is that you also recognize that, so that you're ready to take that on.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, because I often see where people said, yeah, I've got the money and, but I just want you to sort it. And it's a partnership. You've got to work with people on that side. And just on that point, if you want to take a look at how booking automation works with Scott, Scott's kind of going to put a page up. So if you visit Scott Richins, that's SCOTTRICHINS.com/the open mic. Scott's kindly offered to do like a free consultation for listeners. So if you want to learn more about, automated system design, head over to scottrichins.com/the open mic and hit the book a call with him. Scott, with Scott, it's a no pitch. Scott works exactly the same as I do. Let's set up a call. Let's see if there's a fit. Let's find out what you're doing and if you can help. And the worst case, you're going to come off the call having tapped into one of the greatest automated system design minds in the world. So there's no obligation to buy anything. But just go and try it, go and learn if you're struggling where to start, or even if you start with, hey, Scott, am I ready to automate? And then I'm sure Scott's got some questions to sort of take you through that manual offline sales process that he talked about earlier while he's refining that there. So scottrichins.com/the open mic. Go check that out and go and, tap into Scott's mind. And I'm sure he'll be able to help you with that from there. So thanks for offering that, Scott, as well. We do appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
It's a pleasure. So we're assuming that we crossed that flag of, I've got my processes, maybe not 1,000% dialed in, but I'm 99% or 175% or 90% there. I'm there, getting started designing that automation system. What is that starting point, Scott? What would you say for the listeners out there if they know that they're ready, they've passed that checklist, but what's the best start point?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier in the podcast here, and that is so many times people come and as they start looking at how do they design their systems, they'll look around. If you imagine like your table of tools, you'll look around and say, okay, I've got this CRM platform, I've got this form platform, I've got whatever it might be. They're like, what can I build with those? And immediately out of the gate, you start limiting yourself on the possibilities and the experience design of what it is that you're going to create, because you're looking at it through this limited lens of what you have available to you. And what I always suggest is like flip that on its head, like clear out any of the tools. When you think about it, if you were to engage an architect in creating a blueprint for you and for your home, say you wanted to build a new custom home, where does that process start? Does he come and go, okay, well, here are some previous blueprints that I have, so this is all we're going to pick from? No, the first thing is, what do you want? Like how does your family live? What are you trying to create? What kind of lifestyle do you live? And let's understand that first, and then you'll create a blueprint. You don't go, well, I really love hosting parties. Cool. So let's get the carpenter, let's get the mason, let's get them out, and let's start building a place for you to host parties. No, that doesn't make any sense. It's backwards, and we understand that in that world of construction and and architecture and design on that side of things, and you want to apply the same type of process to your systems architecture, your systems design in your business, where the first thing is you get clear on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Yeah. And after you've created that clarity, you then virtually design or map it out. Use something like you said. Lucid Chart is a great one. I've got a couple other tools that I enjoy using, but it can be a whiteboard, it can be an iPad. Just sketch out what is that process. And don't talk about any tools. Hey, if you're doing some sort of online process or a funnel or otherwise, great. Map out, I'm going to have this page, and then I'm going to send them to this page, and I'm going to send them to this page. And hey, you know what? If they opt in, but they don't buy, then what am I going to do? And it just becomes this super simple thing that every point where you have a decision to make, you just ask the question, what if they do and what if they don't? And I know that sounds overly simplistic, but that's how the most complex systems are designed. It's just, okay, what's our true situation? What happens if they do proceed? What happens if they don't proceed? Yeah. And then you walk through each one of those types of processes.
It's just a scenario plan, isn't it?
Yeah,
from that side. So it's very rare that the customer is going to go from A to Z in a straight line. And talking about there is, they may hit a roadblock somewhere and they get distracted. They may have to go into, a lay-by or take a detour around something to then come back on track. Or they may just say, hey, this is not for me, and off they go somewhere else. So what are you going to do at that point? So straight down the middle, left and right, or whichever analogy you want to use, scenario, just dream out it. If it goes great, this is how it works. If it doesn't go so great, this is what we're going to do. And you get all bases covered there, Scott, don't you?
Yeah. And one key point with that, I mean, you might start to, you may have a process in mind that you're thinking of, your listeners may be thinking of here. And what I want to make sure that you recognize is, I'm not saying that in order to start building, you have to map out every single crazy scenario in your business. Think about the 80-20 rule. Yep. Okay. As you start to map those things out, you'll probably start getting down like a tangent, a rabbit hole of like, okay, well, they opted in, but they didn't buy. So maybe I'm going to send them an email. But what if they click on the first one and they go to the page, but they don't buy? And then the second one, they open it, but they don't. Like, you're going to get down this weird rabbit hole, and there will be like 3 people out of 1,000 that may ever end up down that one tangent that you have. I want to make sure that you're clear. Like, the starting point of this is map out and get clarity on that 80%.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, what is the core path that people are going to go through? And then what are the most likely secondary scenarios that they'll walk through? And as you've got the clarity on that, then you can go build those things. And what I recommend to people, there's a phrase that we came up with at Infusionsoft that was, what's essential, what's enhancing.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, what are the core things that you need to get in place? Well, you know what? If I'm going to sell somebody through this process, I need to, if my goal is to sell somebody, it would be essential for me to map out and build at its core a way for them to buy.
Yep.
And then something that tells me to go fulfill. Like, even if I don't automate the fulfillment, great. Let's at least tell us, okay, now it's time to go fulfill. If you don't have that built, then you're missing an essential piece.
Absolutely.
The other items become those enhancements. And so if you're then able to say, hey, you know what? I've got my core built out. What are the 1 or 2 most likely scenarios outside of that where somebody may not go through to purchase, but that I want to loop them back in and try to have a secondary path to try and get them back into purchase? Okay, great. Let's also build, map and build those out. And the rest of these we've identified. We know where the holes are, and make sure that you keep track of where people are going so that you can just let the numbers tell you, where do you need to go build next? Maybe you find out, hey, you know what? We thought this would be the most likely, people would drop out after the opt-in and they wouldn't make the purchase. Maybe more people aren't opting in on your page, and you need to start looking at some sort of retargeting or otherwise. Great. The numbers will tell you that.
Yeah. The data.
Yeah, exactly. The data is the key part. And so allowing yourself to conserve the resources of time, money, and energy, and only build out those core pieces, and then allow the data to tell you the next area to go focus on, and the next area to go focus on, the next area to go focus on. It becomes this process of refinement, where the areas that you're building, you're not wasting those investments, but you're making strategic investments.
No, that's great. And, just slightly off script here, Scott, but what we try and do, and just for help the listeners as well, when you think about it, because what Scott's talking about there, this 80-20, this core thing is, I always sort of try and add, and I take your view on this, Scott, see if you think this is right or you want to correct an element of this. I generally don't mind. But I try and break it down by department in the business as well, internally, because, some things like, where do I start? Do I start with my sales process or my marketing process? Well, for me, there's only really 5 sort of key sort of areas, which is finance. Then you've got operations, which is everything, from systems, customer service and, fulfillment, manufacturing, things like that. Then you've got your people and your hiring and onboarding. You've got your sales and you've got your marketing. The 6th one is corporate governance, but we'll just keep that out for the moment. But so if you break it down, sort of finance, ops, people, sales, and marketing are just as, and then because otherwise your playbook or your document could get so big and so as these rabbit holes like Scott's talking about. To break them down and say, hey, as my team, I'm going to work with just on my sales process, or just my marketing process, or just my finance process. If you're wondering what a finance process might be, it could be if you sell online, it could be the confirmation of the order, the product fulfillment, refunds, whatever it would be, customer service. It could be a knowledge base, or whatever that that could be. It's not just about marketing, like we said at the beginning. So what's your view on that? Do you think that's the right place, Scott, or do you have a different take on splitting the business into segments?
So the interesting thing is everything's layers. Like what you're saying there, absolutely. Look at those different areas of your business, and every one of those, vertical areas will have various things that you can start to automate. I would look at that and I would say, hey, where's the biggest need in my team? Where's the biggest pain point? If your team is not operating functionally, and people don't have direction and clarity on where they're going, like, yeah, I would look at some way to organize your team and have some sort of a system. I've got one here that I use, daily planning and that kind of stuff. That's not super automated, but there's a consistent process that we've got in place for that type of item. But within each one of those as well, if you look at marketing and sales and fulfillment, each of those are various areas on their own. It's like, what are you doing to automate your lead generation? Or what is your process around lead generation? What is your process around sales, around fulfillment, around, upselling or retention, or, all of that type of stuff? There's so many different areas. The first thing that I would look at is just, where's your biggest pain point?
Yeah.
And go solve that, because as humans, we'd like to think that we're altruistic or that we're motivated by the positive, but statistically, most of us are going to work harder to avoid the pain than we are going to reach the pleasure or the positive, the thing that we're aspiring to. And so that's what I look at. Where's the pain?
Perfect. No, that's great.
One thing that I want to go a little bit deeper on as well, the design of your automation systems. There's if I can share with you my experience of how this can fail, and how you can circle around that. I mentioned that back in the day when I was younger and I was leading the manufacturing company. Prior to me leading that company, I had been working on a lot of these special projects and automation, that kind of stuff. And at the time, we were restructuring a lot of our manufacturing accounting type stuff. So our bills of materials, our part numbers and product numbers and all of that kind of stuff. And so I was tasked with leading that project. And in my young exuberance and naivete, if you will, I thought, well, everybody's busy. I will just go think up this brilliant system. I'm a smart guy. I understand the business well. I'll go think up the system and I'll roll it out to people. And it'll be like, Scott's gift to the company. And as I started to roll that system out, the amount of just rejection,
pushback
across the company was incredible. And I'm like, wait a minute, but I've done your job. Like I had legitimately worked in every role that this impacted across the company. And I'm like, but I know what you need. Like, why don't you want this? And it was just like, it was a flaming failure. Like within 2 months, we had to roll everything back. There was just a lot of wobble in the company after that because we were trying to get back on point. A lot of trust was lost and that kind of stuff. And I was just left going, but it was a great system. What happened, And the lesson that came from that was like, well, that didn't work, but I didn't quite know what worked. Okay. So fast forward a couple years. And the pain, the challenge that we were trying to solve at that point is still present in the company, still present in the business. And so we had to try it again. And this time when I tried it, I don't know why I started doing this. I don't know if it was like sage advice from my father, or if it was just dumb luck. But I started asking the team members, and I would go to them as we were approaching this project. And I'd say, hey, what are your biggest challenges in this area? Like if you could wave a magic wand and you could solve 3 of your top challenges with what you're doing day to day, what would those be? And they'd say, well, it would be A, B, and C. Okay, great. So if we were able to find a way to address those, that would be most useful for it. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Like, okay, cool. And so then I would go off and I would start working on something. And as I would come up with a very low fidelity idea, I'd come back and I'd shop it to them. I'd say, hey, well, what if it looks something like this? And it was it was not formal like the rollout that I had done before. It was real low fidelity. And so in their minds and in their experience and in truth, the feedback that they would offer, like there was a lot of opportunity for feedback. They could see that it was a sketch. They could see that it was low fidelity. And so they would offer some feedback, and then I'd take that and I'd come back and I'd incorporate the feedback. Yeah. And I'd show them, hey, what if it was something like this? What if it was something like that? And the amazing thing this time, as we went through the process, was I started to feel this pull from everybody. They're like, yep, Scott, when do we get this? When is this rolling out? Come on, like we want this. And I kid you not, by the time we rolled out the process, it was 95% the same thing that we rolled out 2 years before.
But you got the buy-in, the collaboration, the feedback, and they felt it was
what they wanted.
Yeah.
They took ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. And so a key component, every time I'm working with a client that has a team, if we're going to build a sales process so that you can get your team, your salespeople on the phone with more people and stop wasting time logging the notes and scheduling, automate that stuff so they can do what they do best. Great. Instead of us just rolling out God's gift to the sales team, which they guaranteed will see it otherwise, I encourage my team, great, you need to go co-create with your team. You need to go ask them. You need to go start having conversations. There was a client who I'd been coaching on this year that we're putting together a large fulfillment process right now. And I said, hey, you need to talk to your team. You need to talk to your team. And it was kind of challenging for him to talk to them and describe what it was that we were doing and solicit feedback from them. And so, in their mind, it was just kind of like, okay, what are you guys building? Like, what is this? We don't know. Yeah, sure. It's going to help us. Like, whatever.
And so they get the buy-in straight away. They believe in the trust in it, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. The trust wasn't there yet because it was just this theory. And so we finally had a conversation. I said, hey, let's get on a call with your team. Let me start demoing some things and let's get some feedback from them. And I kid you not, within a 60-second demonstration of what we were starting to create, totally flipped. They caught the vision. They started to see what we were doing. And they said, that would be amazing in our business. We want it. And now the whole conversation around what we're rolling out has been shifted, and they're much more engaged in the whole process. So when it comes to designing your automation systems, like you have got to, if you are not a solopreneur, if you're not working on your own, if you work with people who this team who your process will impact, you have to get those people involved early on in the process, because if you really think about it, you're building something for them. Like, don't inflict it on them. Like, allow them to force it in the process.
Absolutely. And I suppose even if you were a solopreneur, Scott, maybe ask your customers or trusted people who think like that. Hey, I'm thinking about launching this. We've done a lot of Jeff Walker product launch formula stuff in the past. And it's a great way to sort of go out there and say, hey, I'm putting this, and it's not too secret giveaway, but hey, I'm putting this new course or this new product or this new service together. We think we've got it dialed in more or less to what we call a straw man or a low fidelity or a pencil drawing example. Would you spare me a few minutes and maybe you could give them a free voucher or a bit of extra, give them 10% extra on the next order or whatever you do, because even though you might have to pay to get that knowledge, it could save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars further down the line, but by having to course correct with lost opportunities. So get those focus groups together, look at the customers, get the feedback, or trusted advisors, or give Scott a call, like you say, just set up a call with him. You can do that at scottrichins.com/the open mic, and just float the idea past. And sometimes that objective input, don't fall into that trap, listeners, where they're saying, yeah, but I know everything about my business and things like that, because, or the classic, but my business is different. It's not. A lot of time, if you listen to, I think one of the first ever podcasts I ever did, I did the strategy compass. And the strategy compass talks about there's always a customer, there's always a vendor, and there's always a product or service exchange. And then there's always revenue, there's always cost, and there's always margin. And that's sort of the points of the compass. So it doesn't matter really what you're doing. You've got to fall back into that sort of formula of the strategy compass. But I think it's really episode 1 or 2 that I did, because it was, really sort of important to get those strategies out. But yeah, just ask and get those people. And that's the main thing, isn't it, Scott, to get that buy-in early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you are extending that one outside of just the employees. You got to work the process, but also to your clients, to your prospects. I mean, one of the most powerful things that I've seen people do is just like you described, as you're developing a product or a service. I mean, just reach out. You can ask a simple question to your list. Hey, we're looking at building something like this. What's your number one question around it? What's your number one concern? What's your number one challenge? And just solicit that simple feedback, and that'll help give you some additional data points to see.
And you will be surprised as well. I mean, not everybody's going to respond. You're not going to get a 100% respond rate. So you set expectations, but you will be surprised about, how many responses that you do get to stuff like that. I've had conversations with clients in the past saying, "Oh, I don't want to pester them. I don't want to think that I don't know what I'm doing." None of that. You can, if it's put in the right format, something along the lines of, "Hey, we're developing this new product. We've had some questions, a repetitive set of questions from customers or requests from customers, staff. So we're looking at sort of fleshing this out, and we'd really appreciate your input. You're important to us that we serve you." And if you put it something like that, in your own words, people think, they actually feel privileged that, hey, you've asked me, and I've got a voice. And I'm more than just a customer or a supplier or a staff member. And you'll be surprised about what the response rate would be if it's positioned in that way. So give that a try. And again, if you're unsure about that, if you want to send us a message, just use the hashtag #TheOpenMic. If you've got any questions about how to position that questions, we've got some scripted templates that we have. Whether it's product launch, whether it's focus feedback. If you want to send me a DM or use the hashtag #TheOpenMic, I'd be more than happy to get those sent out for you. I'll get my team to distribute them, or we'll even put a link under the podcast for those if anybody's interested in getting those. So that's fine. And thanks for covering that, Scott, because I think the design of them is pretty important because it's like building the house without the blueprints. It's going to be bricks are out of line. The door doesn't fit and things like that. But assuming that that's all designed and we've siloed it into departments, we've got the feedback, we've got all that there. We're ready to roll out. So system rollout and launch strategies, Scott, share some experiences and guidance for the listeners on that area, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is what we just addressed, which is your rollout strategy and communication with your team starts long before the date when you're wanting to roll it out.
Yeah.
Right? So that's rollout tip number one is start rolling out at the beginning of the process. Okay.
Yeah.
But as far as, as you start rolling into the actual phase where your systems are now designed and you've gone through the process of building them, like there are a few key things. I mean, the first one is obvious, but it's test. Okay. It's always going and just walk through things. Do it yourself. Do it. Have other people do it. Have some close friends, colleagues, family, like whatever. Walk people through it. Do it from different computers, different locations, sometimes various platforms out there, especially if you're doing anything online, right? They'll cookie your machine. So the second time you go through it, it'll perform differently. And so just test using some various scenarios and platforms. That's the first one. The other thing is expect things to not launch exactly as planned.
Yeah.
Expect there to be oversights, errors, hiccups in the process. Just expect it. I have built so many systems and your first thought may be maybe that just means you build poorly, Scott. Okay, cool. That can be your perspective. And no matter how much we put into it, there will be some small scenario somewhere where something will just be off. You can't account for 100% of everything, and that's okay. And the point where I finally accepted, hey, you know what? We're going to test absolutely everything we can, and then we are going to watch what happens, and we're going to identify and tweak anything that we see that's off. Your expectations for the rollout become a lot easier because you're expecting to field and manage those types of things, and it doesn't totally, scare you and put you in a panic mode. It's not perfect. No, it's okay. We're prepared for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that expectation, isn't it? And I think, I don't know what your view is on this, Scott, but about documenting and recording as, we call them playbooks. It's not only what we're doing, but it's, what the version 2 or the version 3 looks like. So, if you've ever used software and there's got like a revision history. Like we use a project management system called teamwork.com, and you can build like a notebook up or a file or some type of design. And up in the top right hand corner, there's a little button that's got revisions, and it's notebook 1, notebook 2, notebook 3, and there's all the date and the time that it's being done. And it's great because, I'd always encourage you to sort of document whatever changes that you've done, because, you might be 2 or 3 months, or in Scott's case, in that previous example with the manufacturing company, the relaunch that 2 years later, you will not remember everything that you've done. So going back and saying, hey, on that date and that time, we maybe split test this button, or we added in a new field here or whatever. So always sort of document that, and keep a master record that can be reviewed. Because if you do get it, I was speaking to a client not so long ago in our agency, that had a drop off in traffic. It's like, oh, okay, so when did that start to drop off? We're using Google Analytics. When did that traffic start to drop off? And then you can sort of say, hey, I've got this time frame and this window. And whilst this is more analytics than it is, automation to a degree, but it was related to a campaign, you could sort of isolate that window down and go, yes. Hey, what did we do in that period of August 2018? Oh, well, we did this, we did this. And what it was in the end is they've got a content writer who'd just been doing some content, and they'd put some blogs up, and they'd just cannibalize the keywords. So they're competing against themselves, cannibalizing the keywords on some blog posts. And then suddenly one of their main traffic pages started to lose traffic. So, so, let's look at that and let's either take those out and start over, or, the lesson learned really is build to the content strategy and build to the keyword strategy. Don't just put content up for the sake of putting content. But it's the same with automation, isn't it, Scott? If you change something and then it might affect 2 or 3 other things further down the road.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you start looking at systems integration, it's everybody. I'm sure your clients have run into this. Everybody that you talk to, that you bring in to have these conversations, your finance person will be thinking like siloed in finance, and your operations person is like very siloed in operations, and your fulfillment person very siloed in fulfillment. Like, you have to have that role that has an understanding of all of them to start to play within that. That was the role that I played at the manufacturing company, was I had worked in all of those areas. And so it was like, hey, in customer service, do you realize that change that you're just going to kind of like willy-nilly make is going to have this type of impact in production, in manufacturing, like, because everybody just kind of operates in their own silos. So yeah, it's absolutely making sure that you're seeing across those areas, and you've got somebody who's watching to see, okay, how do changes in one area impact another area?
Yeah, awesome.
Absolutely. And then same thing in your sales and marketing process. You go deep in any one of those. What are the downstream impacts of any changes that you make?
Yeah. And I remember when I used to work in the PLC business as a CEO, Scott, we used to have a change committee. We used to, we're going to launch this or add this or remove this. And it's like, well, nothing gets done unless it goes through the change committee. And then you get a committee, and these are not sort of, obstreperous people, but it's like you say, it's a representative from all key structural areas of the business that said, hey, if we do this, or let's add or delete or amend or refine, or even just publicly put something out, what is the potential impact? And that may not be a systems architectural change. That may be something like, wait, well, the type of questions that we may now get asked for our customer service team could be this. And you hear a lot of bad news, don't you? Whether it's the financial markets crashing and investors, all the customers saying, oh, is my investment safe? So it's about prepping your customer services teams with, if you get asked this question, give this resource or have it ready. So keep the confidence of the client. So that change committee mentality, you don't have to be a stock market or publicly traded business to have that. You just need to be aware of it in your business that, hey, if I do this, and like Scott's saying, that downstream thing, what is going to actually happen down there? Because, it may mean that you still need to make the change. It just means you might need to make the change in a slightly different way to accommodate that. And I think, being, forewarned is forearmed type of thing. And I think
absolutely. My favorite, as you're talking about that, my favorite is the sales rep who receives the call and says, hey, I'm calling about the promotion. I want it. What promotion? Like, nothing makes your company look
silly,
more inept or silly than like nobody know, like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. Like just like have that communication.
And the customers lose trust very, very quickly. Is this real? Is it a scam? The promotion's offered there. Is it marketing? And then, oh, well, I was going to buy that other bigger purchase, but I've lost confidence. It could actually do more damage than good. So get your ducks in a row, communicate out and get them all, get everybody on the same team and help support them. Whether it's, you wouldn't not deliver the product, so why not deliver the service or the system or the architectural automation behind that? So just do a checklist on that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about the impact on the customer. What happens to the sales rep when that happens 3, 4, 5 times? Like, what kind of lack of trust and confidence does that create in leadership, in the team, all of that? Like, the ripple effects on those types of things they're rough. Communication becomes a big key in any of this type of stuff.
It does, absolutely.
And
that's awesome.
There's one last thing that I wanted to cover here on the systems rollout and launch strategies, and that is, we talked about testing, we talked about understanding that it won't be perfect. So the last thing that I put in place on there that I always suggest people do is do a test launch. Do a small rollout. So if you're going to launch a new campaign, or you're going to implement a new sales pipeline, sales system, a new fulfillment system, awesome. How do you take, if it's something that you're going to initiate to your list of clients, how do you take a small subset of them and run it to them? 5-10% of your list, something that gives you enough numbers that you can
meaningful data.
Yeah. Or if it's a new sales process, how do you take one of your channels and start diverting them over to the sales process so that you can test that one out? And it's not flipping a switch and now, like, if something's wrong, your business breaks and everybody's running around with their hair on fire. No, like allow that transition, allow that testing, that stress testing, if you will, to make sure things work. I remember a client of mine that I was helping with Infusionsoft. She had a small list, and she wanted to launch a promotion. And she came to me and we set everything up. She's like, okay, great. I'll go design the email. I'll send it out. She was going to split test, to her. I think she had 3 different emails that she sent to her whole list, which was about 1,000 people. Yeah. And so she had, 300 to one, 300 to another, or the different versions. She comes back to me and she's just in tears and she says, Scott, nobody clicked through. Like, what happened? And I'm like, how did nobody, like, not a single person click through? And I said, well, hey, send me your emails, send me what you had created. Let me take a look. And she sends it over to me and I start looking at her emails. And I go through this thing, it's a lot of text and all that. And I had to respond back. I said, what is there for them to click?
No links.
I said, there's no link in there. She says, no, there's a link. It's that picture at the bottom. It's this nice picture of a landscape that has no call to action that says, hey, click me. It was just a nice, like, picture above her signature. And that was it. And she hadn't considered that, but the impact of having launched this thing to her full list is like, when you start to email your list too much, you can get list burnout, right? And we could try and recover and do the apology email. Hey, I'm so sorry. Like, we had a mistake. We forgot to, link, that kind of thing. But if you're able to discover that on a small amount of your list, you haven't burned your full list. If you realize that something is incorrect, something needs to be tweaked, maybe a subject line needs to be modified so that it drives more opens, all of that kind of stuff. No, just take a small subset of your clients and run it that way. Test it, pick a winner, find out what works best, and then roll that out for the rest of your list. And what you're doing is not only are you stress testing your system, you're also creating it and rolling it out in such a way that you're going to get the best results.
No, absolutely. It's a great piece of advice, and thank you for adding that in. I think, the biggest issue I think people see is, I've got to get it out. We're behind schedule, push, quick as possible. And, and I am actually a believer in this sort of statement as well, that, it doesn't have to be perfect to go out, as long as it's functional, it's right, it's accurate, you can always optimize later. So, that procrastination, don't get stuck between the procrastination of trying to make it, full stop dot perfect, versus being wildly inaccurate. There is a fair and medium balance in the middle. So for all you perfectionists out there, you've got to concede a bit of ground and let it go early. And for all you people who are just wildly reckless, you've got to put a little bit more work in just to get it right. So, that hopefully then removes that pressure to get out, set it out, get your implementation dates done, work through, and then check and test, and then as Scott says, there you can get it out to, to a wider audience. And
yeah, I always say version 1's better than version none.
Correct. That's a great saying. Thanks for reminding me about that. That's awesome. So as we start to wrap up, Scott, here, we've purposely left sort of software and tools and equipment and everything else, the nuts and bolts, the hammers and the spades to the end. As an architect designing these systems, I'd love for you to sort of share with us your favorite tools, your builder's toolbox, if that makes sense, some apps that you can't do without, and some that you maybe tried and weren't so good. And, I just want to be clear to the audience, this is not necessarily any affiliate links or endorsements either. It's just, tools that I use, that Scott uses, and we get value out. It may or may not be relevant in your audience, in your business or whatever. But from your side, Scott, what are your favorite tools that you get a ton of value out of, and, the listeners may want to check out for system automated design?
Yeah, sure. So the first couple would be a whiteboard or an iPad. I see you got one there over your shoulder there.
Oh yeah, we've got lots of whiteboards.
That's where things start. Yeah. What's the process like? Like what are we actually trying to accomplish here? Just sketch some things out. When you want to get in, you want to start, mapping things out. You mentioned Lucid Chart. That's a great way to put together, kind of a flow chart. I've got one that I'm beta testing right now called Guru, which is for funnel projections and mapping those types of things out. I think you mentioned funnel flows earlier. Jacob at funnelflows.com is awesome. We love it. Yeah, there are a lot of different niche solutions for various types of processes that you may be trying to map out. But Guru is one that I like right now. I think that one will become more publicly available in the coming months. And so, yeah, those are just ways to help you just come in and map out, okay, what are these types of processes? And then of course, depending on the platform that you have, sometimes the platforms will have a builder inside of them to like design a marketing campaign or otherwise. What I've found though, again, like we said earlier, is don't start with the system. So many times people will have a tool that looks like it plans that stuff for them. Yes. We both know the Infusionsoft space. There are other spaces that have, like a campaign builder. Yeah. And you can come in and it looks like a flowchart designer where it's like this, then this, then this, then this. And the challenge becomes like many times that platform isn't the only platform that you're using.
Yeah.
There are other platforms that you need to pull in. And now when you're trying to build within that one platform, you can't accurately and adequately account for the external systems. Yes. And so you're left with like this weird hodgepodge trying to like add notes or something else. Somebody I heard described it one time as like, the Russian stacker dolls that all nest inside of each other. It's like trying to take the small one and put it around the big one. And it's like,
you can't do that.
It doesn't quite work, right? It's the wrong order. And so I love using some sort of an external thing. Like I said, a whiteboard or an iPad. I love things digital, or one of these types of tools, Lucid Chart, Funnel Flows, Guru, something like that allows you to plan it out outside of one of your specific platforms or systems.
To accommodate all those external assets and bring them all onto one area.
Exactly. So that's where I'd always start with something like that. So then the next thing, that's the planning, some of the tools that you can use for planning. As far as then executing and implementing things, if you don't have specific point solutions for various areas, and you're looking to determine the first place that I always go is a directory on a platform called Zapier. Yep. Okay. I would imagine, Mike, you're pretty familiar with Zapier. We'll talk about Zapier as a tool and a solution here in a moment. But when I'm looking for tools that I will use to handle specific solutions within my business, the first place that I go to is a platform called Zapier. I look at their directory and I find out which platforms integrate with Zapier. Okay. Yeah. Back in the day, if you wanted to integrate two platforms,
hard work, custom API.
Like go find a developer who speak a completely different language from you. They speak geek, they speak nerd, and you're like, I don't know what you're saying. Yeah. Try to figure out how to communicate your message to them, get them to build something that would integrate those. It's really hard. A tool called Zapier makes that a lot simpler. So I always like to have the option, knowing that those platforms integrate with Zapier, so that any of the multiple tools that I need to pull together, I can make them talk together easily.
Yeah.
And so I always start there. As far as specific tools that I personally know very deeply, I like to wield when I'm building these types of automated systems. Infusionsoft is one, that I spent years there.
Yep.
I love building marketing systems with that, sales systems, fulfillment systems. Another one that does similar items is Entreport.
Yep.
That's one that is, again, very powerful. You can build campaigns, scenario-based, behavior-based follow-up type stuff. And then another one that I like to build for like landing pages, funnels, online orders, that type of stuff, is ClickFunnels. And so those are three of my favorite platforms that I pull from for those core processes. There's always things that you'll bolt on for like calendaring and other types of needs of your business. But again, those are all determined based on what you planned and what you mapped out to start with.
Yeah, it's great. And I just want to bounce it back to the Zapier sort of.
Yeah.
For you guys, if you've not sort of come across Zapier or Zapier, which, whatever way you pronounce it is, see it very much like a travel plug. We all go abroad and, we here in the UK, we've got a 3-pin plug. Over in the States, you've got a 2-pin plug. So my 3-pin plug doesn't go in. So you take a travel adapter. And, the simplest example for Zapier would be a travel adapter. So I'll give you an example. What we use it for, we use it to take our financial transactions out and put it into our CRM system. So, when it comes in there, it'll take that from that side. We've previously used it in the past to link things like Infusionsoft or HubSpot into Eventbrite. So if you run an Eventbrite, events and buy tickets, you buy the ticket inside Eventbrite and it comes in, and then, Zapier takes all the Eventbrite information and translates it or converts it and sends it to Infusionsoft, into HubSpot, into whatever you want to use that with. So see it very much like a travel, but I love that example, Scott. I've never actually thought about it that way. Whereas, hey, what am I trying to do? Let me go to the directory and see which two apps I'll do that sort of thing with, either what my base systems that I've already got employed, or what systems do I potentially need to go out and either trial or buy. Because with 5,000, probably even more, by the time this recording goes out, there might be 5,500 systems out there. You can spend and waste a lot of time and money testing or buying systems and then get stuck in a 12-month contract. Then you find it doesn't do. So, find out what that connection does to either your base system that you currently employed or you can't remove for whatever investment reasons, or maybe your business is built out on that, and then see what plugs in. And it's just basically like a Google search for apps to a degree, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome piece of advice.
And people that, platforms and companies that choose to integrate with Zapier tells you a little bit about their approach to things. They're recognizing that they're not the only solution out there, that your business has other needs. And so they're facilitating a way for you to use their platform as a point solution that integrates with everything else. And so there's just kind of an approach, a mentality to that as well. That I appreciate. It tells me a little bit about the company,
Yeah, no, that's great. Just one that I want to put in as well, and that's Slack. We couldn't run without Slack. We use it for internal client comms. We have different channels in there. You can even use it as a collaboration tool, really. So, hey, I'm running this idea. Could you give me some feedback on it? You can upload video, upload files, do individual messages and things like that. And the great thing is that, a bit like Zapier, Slack integrates with more or less everything and anything decent on the planet. So, for example, when a client service ticket comes into our HubSpot Service Hub platform, it automatically gets routed into our Slack system so we can see it live. It's on the go, and it just does so much things. Our Vimeo integrates with it. There's so many things that Slack does. And, I was a little bit rusty with it to start with because I could never find anything on the search. But I think once you get past that and you understand how to use that a bit better, I think that's a tool that we love. And Zoom, we're recording this podcast on Zoom. Yeah, and we run our webinars through Zoom as well as screen record shows. And a tool that we've just come across, Scott, that was courtesy of you, and I'm going to give you great credit for this, that we absolutely can't even imagine we lived before we had it, was Paste. Give credit to Scott for this. I saw a video that he did on Facebook, and if you want to check out what Scott's doing on Facebook, just visit facebook.com/Scott Richins. That's SCOTT RICHINS on Facebook. And he just did this quick little video and said, hey, if you're like me and you're doing a lot of copying and pasting, like we run on Apple Mac network, so we have all the little yellow note sticky pads here, there, and everywhere. We've got Evernote stuck over here. We've got this, that, the other. I see this video, and Scott's using this tool called Paste, and I see it within like 30 seconds of your video finishing. I'm on the site, I've signed up, and
you're purchasing it.
And it's something ridiculous, like $14.99 a year to buy. So it's not even a monthly subscription. It's like $15 a year to buy. So Paste, if you want to get that link, if you can't find it, shoot us a message using the hashtag #TheOpenMic. We'll get you that posted below as well. But thanks for that, Scott, because all our team run Paste now. We all those little boards, we know where to go. And what it is, basically, whatever you copy on your system goes onto a board. You can segment them. So if you want a Bitly link, you want a calendar link, you want this, that, the other, you can just go. And we use it for a lot of LinkedIn stuff. So we do a lot of LinkedIn Sales Navigator messages and outreaches. So wishing people happy birthday, congratulating them on the new role, and we just go copy, paste, done. And it's automation on a different level. You know, it's automation of like, instead of, if you've ever been in that spot where you copy something and you're going to go paste it, but before you do that, you copy something else and you're like, no, I mean, especially if you like cut something and you removed it and now you just lost it. You're just like that pit in your stomach. Yeah, well, paste just is like an infinite history of all of the things that you've copied. Or if you have things that you often use, you know, I'll be typing an email and it's like, oh, hey, I want somebody to go book a 30-minute call with me. Well, instead of logging into my calendar platform and going and copying the URL and pasting it over here, no, it's just got, you know, saved snippets of text and I can just here, boom, paste it and we're good to go. So yeah, that's absolute one. And that's been my 2018 app of the year. That was, it's seriously 2018 app of the year.
So much time, so much time. So yeah, that's kind of stuff on Facebook. I've heard a lot of feedback like that, so I'm going to start going through a lot more things.
Do more because
live on those types of things.
It doesn't matter, you know, and for us, we practice what we preach. We follow what Scott does, you know, heavily. And you know, I mentioned earlier at the podcast, I probably know you 2 or 3 years, but I think it's a lot longer because I first met you in London when we did one of those SCS events.
Oh yes,
remember when we did that in London? What was that, like 2012 or 13 or something ridiculous like that? And we've got Randy Tate. Randy was there doing a session down there, and I forget, was it an SCS or some SCS or something? What was it, that session? I forget what it was called.
I don't remember what that one was specifically called, but yes, I remember where we were. I remember the hotel. I remember the room. And that was before you had really started going deep down the infusion.
way before. You know, and it must be might be 5 or 6 years ago. That I don't know what it was, but it's just sort of flashed back to me there. But the reason why I recall back on that is that Scott's got so much knowledge, and it's not just the systems, but it's the people, it's the networks, it's the what not to do more than sometimes what to do. So as I say, I highly encourage you, if you want to head over to scottrichins.com/theopenmic. You know, if you're struggling and you want some advice, you want to get started, set up a call with Scott. He'd be more than happy to, you know, help you. And the worst way, like I say, you're going to get some pro tips. You're going to save yourself a bucket of time. And it might just be some of those throwaway comments that Scott does, like, you know, I'll just do this little video on this pace thing. And then literally it's changed the way we all our sort of internal business. So thank you for that, Scott. I do appreciate it.
I'm glad to hear it.
And unless there is anything that's going to come out in the next 6 or 7 weeks, because we date the podcast when we record them, so this is being recorded early November 2018. But so unless anything's coming out, that's going to be our app of the year. So just a little throwaway comment that Scott thought I'll do a video on that has helped our business, and I'm sure it can help you as well. So Scott, I appreciate you sharing your time and your experience. Thanks ever so much for sharing that awesome value. I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been great and learning more off you as well every time. It's been an absolute pleasure sort of to have you on the show. And before we wrap up on this, what I like to do, because we talk about so many things, and you know, some of the feedback that we get on the open mic is, why you cover so much stuff. Your podcasts are a lot longer than others, but I get glued to them. But could you always give us a summary at the end? So I always ask our guest influencers to provide sort of top 3 pro tips about automated design systems. You know, what are maybe the top 3 that you should do, and any maybe that you don't do? If you could just summarize and recap for us at the end, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So when it comes again to designing and implementing your automated systems, you know, the key things that you got to do, number one, like define the process first.
Yeah.
Like map it out, define it, actually run the process manually if that's possible. Like run it first, prove that it works, and that it's something that you want to automate. So design the process first. Number two, involve your team. Yeah. Involve your clients or your prospects, but most definitely involve your team in that design. If they're going to be working it, they're going to be running it, they're going to be receiving the questions that come from it. You've got to involve them so that they help shape that, so that they help co-create that, and then they take ownership of that one, so that when it rolls out, it's something that they want to be a part of. And then number three is when you're actually pushing that one out, when you're actually rolling it out, do a test launch. Like expect there to be some bumps along the way. Like that just happens. Like, and that's okay. Like, don't think that you failed. Prepare for it, plan for it. Don't launch on a Friday afternoon, that kind of stuff. But just plan for that and have your team ready to go. Hey, give us any feedback that you see. Set the expectation with your team. Like, hey, there's probably going to be some stuff that happens, and that's okay. We want you to help us, refine it, identify those things, get their buy-in on that one as well. And then what that's going to do is that's going to create a lot more confidence and a lot more ease around your launch, so that everybody that's involved on that one is just able to have a much better experience.
Absolutely phenomenal, Scott. Thank you very much indeed. So some awesome advice, and we'll get those pro tips logged out for you as well. So thanks again, Scott. As I say, I really appreciate the time. And if you want to learn more about the great work that Scott is doing, just visit scottrichins.com. You can check him out at linkedin.com/IN/Scott Richins, and that's SCOTTRICHINS. Facebook is the place where Scott's putting a lot of these tips out, like the little paste thing we gave earlier. So facebook.com/Scott Richins. And as I say, Scott, thanks for being on the show today. We really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me, and glad to be able to share some of the experience here with your audience.
That's great. And don't forget, you can pick up a free consultation with Scott. Just visit scottrichins.com/the open mic. And as always, we appreciate you tuning into this episode. To always go inbound, get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen. And we're going to pick up with you on next week's show.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by the Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.